Yep.
Like, is it real? Is
So
it not?
yeah, um, we were talking about what we want to talk about today, and I wanted to talk about how when I was a behavior interventionist, that's what it was called at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Most people now are registered behavior technicians, RBTs. I never wanted to be a BCBA. I went to go get my master's for applied behavior analysis after 3 years of being a behavior therapist, as they called it at the time. But I never wanted to be a BCBA because I saw what they did. They didn't get to work with the students or the learners that often. They were constantly stressed. They had to do a lot of organizational bookkeeping, typing work that just seemed like some stuff that I did not want to do. I wanted to actually be with the client, working with them. And I felt like that's where I derived my joy, seeing that change of behavior across time and seeing them be able to better engage with their friends, family, environments. That's what made me like what I did. And I felt like becoming a BCBA meant I had to get further away from that. So, interestingly enough, when I became a BCBA, I ended up just going right back to school to get my PhD in special education. But like even now, I could leave our jobs as a professor and make more money being a BCBA. But that is not something that seems appetizing to me or appealing in the slightest.
Yeah,
What say
hard to
you?
agree. Well, there's a few different pieces to this here. I think that, in a similar vein, like I found the field, I guess you can say, in like the early 2010s. I was, straight out of college looking for a job. I found a position in like autism care service and training families and caregivers, and I really liked it. But it just dabbled in ABA. And so I ended up getting experience as a behavior interventionist, therapist, whatever, until 2014. It wasn't an RBT thing. So I was in a very similar boat. And I really liked interacting with my learners too. And that was kind of the thing that I didn't think ahead in the regard that you did. I just kind of thought, okay, well, if I want to advance, I need to move up the ladder. And I already have a master's degree, so I just need the certification courses, blah, blah, blah. And so I pursued it because that was just kind of what you do. You either stick with being a direct implementer and eventually find something else to go do, or you stay with it and then you move up the ladder. And so I just kind of followed the rule. It worked out because I really enjoyed what I was studying, but I found myself in many positions where, I don't know, there was such a contrast in what I did. So first I worked for a nonprofit, which was very different than profit based. Then I switched to a profit based model, and I did not like that at all. Did not. The nonprofit was great. It had some disadvantages, obviously, but I would go back to nonprofit in a heartbeat over having to go into a for profit model. I think it's predatory. I think it really takes advantage of many, many different people in the model. And we can talk more about that. But yeah, it's funny because it was never like on my goal sheet. My goal sheet was to, once I went into college, I was like, I want to teach, I want to be a professor, I want to do research and all that sort of stuff. So that was always my goal. It was never to just like be a BCBA and stop. I respect those who that is their goal, because you can obviously have major impact on people's lives and all that, but that was never my like last chapter of my career,
Hmm.
so to speak. So I always had like a further goal. So I guess to answer your question succinctly, no, it was never my goal to be a BCBA. It was to be a professor, and I just happened to teach ABA in the process.
Yeah. No. I think that I've been incredibly lucky. I know I've been incredibly lucky with my experience in the field because I had advisors and supervisors that were just outstanding. Interestingly, I think it speaks to the field. All women. It was two black women in the beginning that were my supervisors, and then a white lesbian woman when I moved to LA who was my supervisor. All of them incredibly knowledgeable, helped me learn what to do, how to do it. And I didn't know, like, the way that people talk about ABA online, I would have never known because the ABA that I was doing and who I was working with, I didn't have a lot of the problematic procedures and implementations that a lot of ABA has a history of, even today. I was working with students and learners who didn't um who definitely had high instances of like hitting, biting, spitting, kicking, elopement, SIB and all that stuff. But I also had students who like didn't like to eat, so we made eating fun. You know what I mean? It was because they had a history of being force fed because they had all these surgeries and stuff like. So like I had all these different experiences that led me to showed me like the amazing things that contriving the environment and making it so that learners can have their desirable behavior or appropriate behavior or pro-social behavior come into contact with reinforcement, and then show them that like, hey, if you communicate like this you can get it instead of hitting your head. Like that was really cool for me. And then I liked it, but I felt like I could do more and learn more. So I went to learn more, and it was really interesting to hear my peers because, like, when you're actually in the field as a RBT or as a behavior tech or whatever, you don't really see a lot of other people from a lot of other places doing the job unless they're in the setting that you're in, unless you're in a clinic. Like, I was out in the schools and at the home, so I was alone compared to all those other people most of the time. So I didn't see a lot of the other procedures and practices that were being implemented. And I didn't ended up doing a lot of DTT because of just my clientele. So it was really interesting to hear the experiences of other people, especially other people that are practicing in the field. And I'm like, I've never done that. Why are you like I'm so confused? Like, why are you doing that? You know?
Right. Yeah, I think that, you bring up a really good point. Like, we talk about being on an island, so to speak, and like feeling like you're alone doing these certain procedures and whatnot. And I think that that also speaks to the different cultures of settings. And so, like, with in home or school based or other type of basically not for profit clinical models, it's so different, so very very different, and I consider that a good thing, because you don't have the corruption of like a toxic culture. You don't have the capacity of micromanagement. You don't have all of these things that lead to burnout and cause a lot of issues in the clinic base. I was actually curiously trying to find some sort of data on the different settings where ABA is used, and I can't really find anything solid on it. But I would love to know, like, what percentage of ABA is used in clinic, what percentage is used, outside of clinic and in actually applied settings, what's not related to autism and
Yeah.
disability care. And I'm sure there's something, but just like a surface search, I could not find anything specific. But even within those different settings of ABA, I think that it's context is so important and valuable. And when you talk to the culture of ABA, a lot of times the criticisms are sitting within the in clinic model. They're not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily sitting outside of that, and valid also based on like my experiences, what I've seen, what I've heard, what my friends in the field have also experienced. So yeah, I think that that is an important caveat to include in the discussion as we can.
I agree. And then also it's really interesting to hear about people's experiences in ABA. And a lot of times, like all the large men I know, such as myself, have a similar pattern of clients and client
Yep.
behavior. My DTT is not nearly as good as some RBT that does DTT every day. That's because my clients that I was given weren't doing DTT all the time. I was in naturalistic settings working on improving behavior that would keep them and others safe. That was the job that I was given. And then when I had clients that were doing other stuff, it was interesting because I was like, this is how somebody goes to work every day. Like this is their experience. I remember like subbing sometimes, subcasing, which is all wild back in the day. Just like, oh, one day you're just gonna randomly go to this
Yeah.
random person, read this, and then drive away.
Raw dog.
Yeah,
Raw dog
which
therapy. Just go on in.
which I loved. People hated it, but I
Oh,
loved
I hated it.
because yeah, okay, so let's talk about that. I loved it because I felt like I was Batman. I was given the
Oh,
behavior plan, and then I got to go in and then support the learner. And I think that also because I'm a male entering a school, everybody's like, oh my God, like, look at this.
oh
This
yeah.
is a
The
unicorn coming
drool.
in. Exactly.
Ugh,
And
what are
then
you
like
doing
I
with
had to
these?
learn, yeah, and I had to learn like literally kids will treat me differently than my women counterparts who are in there doing. If they do the exact same thing, they're not always
Yeah.
going to get the same exact behavior, and then oftentimes they will get different, worse behavior compared to what I will get, just because I'm a male entering. And that was something that I learned very quickly early on. And yeah, so I ended up liking sub sessions. How about you?
No, I hated them. But I'm autistic, so like I feel that you just kind of throw, and it would always come at the, now that I know these things, it makes so much more sense, but I didn't know them at the time. So, disclaimer, but when I was a therapist, I was like in my 20s. I was not okay with the spontaneous schedule changes. So that would already throw me off, right? So then they'd be like, okay, instead of going to this person, you're going to this person. And it would be like, a difference of like 5 minutes or an hour that I would have to process that information most of the time. That's already
Hmm.
setting me up for failure because I'm already like, what's going on, the chaos of trying to figure out where I'm supposed to go, what I'm supposed to do. And then I get this plan with a kid I've never paired with. They don't know me from Jane or anybody else. Like, why should they have to do anything that I tell them to do? Why should they care about me being present? And that's totally valid. So, gaining some sort of rapport with the learner was always my focus. And so, like, on the one hand, I always valued that piece of it because then I'm like, I'm getting to know another learner. They're getting to know me. If I have to come in the future, they might be happy to see me because they don't get to see me as often. And hopefully, I'm paired with reinforcement. But I would always get the pressure of having to run a program. And it's like, but the kid doesn't know who I am yet. Like, I can't do that until they actually know that I value them and we have that relationship. So yeah, I don't know. I just always really struggled with it. And the novelty of the situations, of course, I would read the plans in thorough detail. I would
Hmm.
usually have questions that I couldn't get answered right away. And so that was such a challenge for me because I really value routine. I value consistency. The dopamine fix for my ADHD was great because I got to do different things, but at the same time, it came at such a cost for me, which meant that I wasn't as present for my learner. So
Hmm.
now that I know these things, I can explain them and say, hey, you know, if you could reduce the amount of novelty that happens in my scheduling day, which is not always possible, we all get sick, we all have things come up,
Yeah.
but that could have really been a helpful accommodation for me. But thinking back on it, it's just like, well, no wonder, it threw me off so much. And hopefully, the learners never felt that impact. But I cannot say that that was not the case because it impacted so much of my setting events for that day. So yeah, it's a struggle. So I get the novelty as well, especially coming from a male perspective. That I
Yeah.
could totally see because you're rewarded heavily in ABA
Hmm.
being a male implementer. And I would even challenge that when it comes to like hiring bias, men get preferential treatment as far as hiring procedures go. Like I
Oh yeah.
remember all settings, anytime a guy would come in and interview, everyone would be like, we really loved him, blah, blah, blah. It's like, but did you actually love them? Or is it just because of their gender? Because I feel that, there's definitely thirst trapping in ABA for like male practitioners, especially good ones.
Yeah.
So, yeah, any male that would come through the door, we'd hire them. And, I would even have objections. I'd be like, hey, I saw them kind of interacting with this kid. I think they're going to be weird. And, in ways that, maybe not be great. And they ended up being
Hmm.
really bad at the job. And it's like, is
Yeah.
having a male present just because of safety concerns, which is also sexist, by the way,
Yeah.
um, does that take precedence over building the culture of ABA and trying to, make it more equitable? So it, there's a
Yeah.
lot of thoughts there.
You could be a male and be so bad at your job. First of all,
So bad.
that's everywhere. That's not just ABA. That's
That's
everywhere.
true. That's true. Very
But
prominent in ABA, though.
especially, yeah, especially in ABA. And I remember the first time I went into a session, I was terrible, but I also didn't have the support of a supervisor who said that they would come and then cancel the last minute 3 hour session with a 4 year old at home. God, I still remember that to this day. I was looking through that binder trying to understand what I was supposed to be doing.
Right.
I can't imagine how many people have gone through that, and that shouldn't be the way that it's done.
Yeah.
But I realized that having the opportunity to have to be excited about a sub case is not the norm, even
Yeah.
for people that don't have a disability or any disabilities. I've been very much in the minority when it comes to enjoying or being excited about a sub case. And I think that that's because at the time, especially, I knew that I was just a big kid, and I'm excited for recess like the kids are excited for recess. I'm going to be running around like they're going to be running around, and I'm going to get my kid to play with other kids because the other kids want me to play as well. So it's a bunch of adults standing around while I am like, jungle gym. I'm in there. You know what I mean? We playing the game, playing basketball. I'm in there. Like every single thing. Total boy energy, right? And they're like, oh, we loved him. Yeah, you loved him because he was just a responsible kid in the
Right.
school. You know. So I had that privilege. And then when it came to doing work, my redirection is different from my women coworkers redirection, and it has a different probability of having a response that we're looking for. And now that's not to say that I wasn't good at my job, because I knew I was incredible at my job. I
Mm-hmm.
am incredible at my
Yeah.
job. But also, what compounds on top of that is the intersection of being a male, making it easier for me to get through with my behavior. And it's something that I think that we need to recognize and notice, because I remember a lot of males who were just like, bro, I know they're happy that you're here, but I just need you to not be here. Like, I, I had a guy, he got pushed in a planter box by the kid, and he like broke his leg, and I was like, send him home.
Mm.
I was like, I know we're on a 2-on-1, but send him home. I got this.
Oh my gosh. It's such a challenge because there's such a lack of representation. It's funny because this is like, teaching and ABA and like all of the compassionate fields, nursing, all of that are very overrepresented by women. And so, like, there's this dynamic where it's like we want more male representation. And I know that's so
Hmm.
funny to say because usually that's not what we have to say. But we want more male representation, especially black male representation in our field, because we need individuals who understand those intersectional pieces when we're working with different cultures of learners. And so that is such a hard struggle because it's like, whereas it's like we're letting the door open, we're bringing in all of the men who are interested remotely in the field. That's good for representation, but it's also not potentially helping the issue of, are we actually teaching and training the right things? Are these people actually good for the job? Are we getting the right people and the right candidates who identify as male coming through the door? So it's such a catch 22, and it's I've seen them too. You
Hmm.
describing the bad male therapist. I've seen it too, and I've seen the learned helplessness. I've seen the I'm not going to do what you say. You're a woman coming in to tell me. And even though that's not necessarily how it was described to me, I know that's how, what probably had to happen. Because if I come in and I tell you, hey, let's try doing it this way, and the second I walk out the door, you're doing it the opposite, there's some sort of belligerent difference
Hmm.
here. So that's happened on my watch as well. And, I don't come in all authoritarian, like, this is what you have to do. You have to do as I say. That was never my approach. So I would really hope it wasn't just a, I'm going to match your energy sort of thing. It was just a, she can't tell me what to do. Damn woman.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, we want good male representation in the field. And one of the things that you just reminded me of, excuse me, was my when I went to LA and I had a new supervisor who was like really my mentor when it really came to how to do good ABA with especially with a high incident individuals or individuals who have behaviors of high incidence. She One of the things she said when we were like, saying bye and everything, she's like, I remember when you came in and you were so cocky and arrogant. And I was like, we're gonna get him right. We're gonna fix him. We're gonna help him up. And now you're more curious. You're more like I was patient always, so I wouldn't say patient, but you're less likely to come in with that attitude, and you're softer. And one of the things I had to learn actually, and she had to teach me, was to be more stern because I was
Mm-hmm.
totally a pushover, and I
Still
wouldn't
am.
want, yeah, and like sometimes you do have to like not tell somebody what to do, but you can't be just like one of the things they say is like don't make everything a question. I don't know how I feel about that now, but what I do feel is that if everything is just like oh loosey goosey and there's no structure to anything, then it's gonna make it difficult for things to happen that need to happen. You know what I mean? That to let make learning occur. So having structure really helped me, and having somebody be like kind of on my butt, like yeah, you're a male and you're all right, but I need you to also be doing this and that and the third and like let's look at your data, let's look at your notes, let's look at this, let's look at that. And she was really, really on me to improve. And I did because I had somebody that was really willing to like push me further than just enough.
Yeah. But men are socialized that way, though. You know what I mean? So, like, in society, we train men to be a certain way of, I don't have to be soft. I'm not going to show emotion. I'm not going to, do all these things. So, the way that you're describing your attitude or demeanor upon entering the field, it was just a product of your environment,
Yeah.
strictly. That's the way I see it. And so maybe that is part of the reason why the field doesn't necessarily appeal to men, is because it's the antithesis of what socialization has been happening
Mm.
this whole entire time. And so, especially with these talks about let's be more compassionate behavior analysts, let's have compassionate ABA, kind extinction, whatever that is. Let's do all of these things, but that's literally the opposite of how men are socialized and conditioned and reinforced behaviorally. So that
Yeah.
was just kind of a light bulb moment for me as you were talking about that.
I agree. And I think that the way that we market what the job is would have to change substantially to get more men
Yes.
to come into the field. Like if you led with you get to go to recess and play sports. And instead of being at a
I'm out.
cubicle at your desk all day, yeah, but I mean, and then you go into the classroom, you work with them to be able to like. I wanted to earn outside time just as bad as they did, so my motivation to get their behavior up was incredibly high. You know what I
Right.
mean? So that
That's so
worked,
funny.
and if they marketed the job like that, I bet there'd be a lot more
Yeah.
men that would want to be in the field. And then talking to like I remember I had a teenage client and we went and I was talking to him and he was like I have this girlfriend, but she never wants to go on camera with me. She only wants to text. And we've never been on camera together, but she's my girlfriend who's lives in Arizona far away. And I was like, hey, hey, buddy. I know we haven't known each other for a long time, but do you know what catfishing is? And just like having like conversations like that to a kid that didn't have a male in the house or probably any male friends that were really like
Yeah,
willing to sit and talk, like those chances, especially in the school when it's like he's already quote unquote acting up, so people aren't going to give him the grace to sit down and listen to him and his life, you know what I mean, and just being able to have that conversation with him on another level, because we need more straight males. I think is really interesting, just because we we don't have people that can guide students enough in schools, because males aren't going to be educators either. They're not going to become
no,
teachers, special educators, not nearly enough. It's
right.
like you said, seen as a women's job, when I think that like it's an incredibly important and empowering job to have.
Is when you said a woman's job, I have to like add a piece of humor to this because I thought of The Office whenever they're doing the health insurance review and it's like hot dog fingers and all that sort of thing. He's talking about like real problems, Phyllis, not a woman's troubles or whatever.
Yeah.
Like my spouse and I always cite that, and it's just a woman's troubles, a woman's job, like that. But that's the thing is like any of the considered compassionate approaches in a job, they're predominantly women, and it's predominantly seen as a female. The first time that I know a lot of individuals encounter a male nurse, there's also the bias that that male nurse is also gay.
Hmm.
And it's like, but that is once again conditioned socially. I don't know. It's just, when you think about it, it's just, there's so many complexities. But I definitely agree. ABA does a really bad job at marketing anyway. So the last thing they're going to do well is marketing for a job position for an RBT or a direct implementer. Of course, we're not going to do it well because we don't do marketing ourselves very well, because look at where we are. And it's funny because like I literally would be the opposite. It's like, do you want to go outside at recess? No. I was literally the kid in elementary school who was like, can I just stay inside and read in the reading corner on my beanbag? Because like I don't
Hmm.
want to go outside. But once again, self reflection, knowing I was autistic and unsupported, that probably would have been really good to know then. But
Yeah.
anyway, yeah, I wasn't out playing Foursquare with the kids or like doing any of that. I was, if nothing else, watching from afar and laughing and maybe gossiping with another friend. And that's it.
And you know what? That's okay. There needs to be a space for that as well. Because while I was out there literally ripping the knee part of every one of my jeans, um,
Oh, man.
it was the '90s, early aughts.
Yeah, it was in
We were
style. It's
we
fine.
were outside, doing stuff, being active. Um, I I just I think that we're brushing up against the patriarchy again, and
Mm-hmm.
it's interesting the way that patriarchy limits the experiences of men, the things that they can do, the things
Yeah.
that they can be good at, the things that they can care about. And it's one of the many ways that patriarchy harms men, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And the idea is like, I hate when people say, oh, he's soft. It's like, you have to, what is he, a piece of wood? Like, why does somebody have to
Yeah.
always be hard and rude and terrible and
Yeah.
inhumane? That's your idea of a man? Like, that's so
A man.
terrible.
Yeah.
And that's literally the reason why we have all the wars and all the terrible shit that's ever happened. Like, it's because all that. So whenever you try to push back on it, it's interesting to hear what people have been propagandized to believe. And of course, we've all been propagandized. You know what I mean? There's all sorts of propaganda
Oh,
that works on
yeah.
everybody, And I wouldn't blame them for the propaganda working on them. But when you're an adult and you're not ever working to unpack that, that's where it becomes problematic. And I see that a lot. And I'm at a point where I have to say, I've read enough to push back on it, and a lot of people who haven't read look at me like an alien, and I'm
Me
just
too.
like, oh, I don't necessarily want to be around you or converse with you or
Yeah, you've chosen to be an advocate, so you kind of
yeah.
have to.
Yeah, but you have to be in these spaces. It's like
Yeah, it's
you and
hard.
then you could try to teach, but at the same time, you're going to get that pushback.
Always. Absolutely. And I think that it also has to do with not only gender, but there's intersection as far as generational education and generational knowledge. And this is something that I know I unpack with a lot of my fellow millennial friends, for instance, emotional maturity, emotional stability, emotional awareness, even. And as someone who, in the last like 5 years, has really worked to kind of unpack what that even means, I originally came into my late 30s thinking that there were like four emotions like the happy, sad, mad, and maybe upset, or like, I don't know. So basically, there were like four emotions. And, we've talked
Hmm.
historically about the emotion wheel and how complex emotions are and all of that. And so understanding that, like, my parents, who are of the boomer generation, never taught me emotional maturity. They never taught me those spaces. Even me as a girl, I was socialized to basically, like, my mother would encourage me to talk about my feelings, but my father would be like, shut it down. It doesn't exist, blah, blah, blah. Now, my father's toxic AF, and I don't speak with him, and there's a really good reason why. But, kind of talking about how those concepts are developed over different generations. And I think we're kind of moving away from some of those old school ideas on emotions and having to just like keep things bottled up. We're learning the harm that comes by doing that, and the ACEs that can be result, the adverse childhood effects that can happen as a result of that.
Hmm.
And if you've been diagnosed with PTSD or complex PTSD like I have, you really see how those long-term effects can continue to shape your behavior, and really trying to work to unpack those. No one can deny that all of the generations who have lived through all of these traumatic worldwide effects or worldwide events has not been traumatic. So we all
Hmm.
have trauma. We all have
Hmm.
things we have to work on, and how we develop emotionally really reflects our own work on those things, I think.
I agree. I agree. And what you were saying really makes me think about the ways that, like, at least men, especially generational men, are socialized to be able to even tact their emotions. Like a lot of times, like you said, you only knowing a few, but
Yeah, I still
knowing a
struggle.
few is great. Yeah, great compared to not being able to tact an emotion or why it's happening or what's going on. One of my favorite flavors of TikToks online right now is like when it'll be a woman and her like husband and her like fiance or boyfriend, and like she'll ask questions that he never asked. Like he'll be like, "Oh yeah, we have a wedding to go to." She'll be like,
Yeah.
who is he getting married to? What was the how did he propose? What does the ring look like? When's the wedding? Where is the wedding? Why? Like all these questions that men just
Yeah.
never ask, right? And we're not socialized to ask questions. And being with my fiance, who's a marriage and family therapist, it made me ask more questions because at first, when she would ask me a lot of questions, I get upset. I was like, why are you asking all these questions? You know what I mean?
Right.
But like, she's
But you're
genuinely trying to
conditioned that way.
understand. Exactly.
It's a defensive thing. Yeah.
Exactly. So learning to ask questions not only of others but of myself is one of the better ways that I've learned to unpack my feelings and thoughts about things. And
Yeah.
I think it's something that we need to intentionally design in instruction to have, especially men, but people ask questions, tack to your emotions, understand what's going on around, what the environmental conditions are when the emotions occur, and then also to ask questions as why am I feeling like this? Is it a problem that I'm feeling like this? And why do I think it's a problem that I'm feeling like this? I mean, I think this just goes back to like I'm sorry, one of the experiences I had recently where I really like this artist, Infinite Coles. and they are gay. And when they performed, I loved the music, and I was like, why am I feeling like I shouldn't be able to cheer for this? And I was brushing up against those difficult feelings of like homophobia that I was
Yeah.
not even raised in my household, because my parents always said like if either of you were gay, like they literally said if either of you were gay, talking about my brother and I, we would still love you the same, blah blah blah. They prepared it, but like, when it came to the friends, the other kids outside, what we were seeing on the TV or hearing, we would learn being gay, what we were being taught is not okay. So when I'm watching this openly gay person perform, and it's a much better performance than any straight rapper ever put out, I gotta tell you. But like I was coming up against those feelings of homophobia, and I was like, I need to unpack this. I need to see, why do I feel like this? Do I think that if I enjoy this, that makes me gay, and that's a problem? That's homophobic. That's messed up. That goes against everything that you believe, Jared. So I had to free myself of that baggage and just enjoy. And it was something that I think about a lot right now, because I'm thinking how many other males are not going to have that, or are going
Yeah,
to
and they
stop
won't experience
themselves.
it.
Exactly. So
That's frustrating. And on that same token, like, being able to ask questions is one thing, but I had to unpack the whole if people are asking questions, that doesn't mean they're challenging me thing. But that's coming from a woman. And so there's that difference of like, whenever sometimes I have been questioned about things, it's been to undermine my perspective or undermine my authority, which I've never actually sought out and cared to have. But yeah, I think of it that way too. And so when I first started teaching, it was hard for me if I had a student who would ask a lot of questions initially, because I was like, does this mean that you don't believe me? Does this mean that I'm not explaining things in a way that I really should be? Or is this you just challenging me? But I see both sides of it, because like I will ask questions of people who will get really defensive because I'm autistic, and generally like I want to understand the why behind things, and that is usually seen as a challenge. In any clinic setting that I've been in, when I've asked those questions, why do we do things this way? It's met with, well, because that's how we do it. And it's like
yeah,
not a clear answer, but that doesn't help me, because I need to understand the function, because in my head, I've already seen 10 better ways to do it. And if I tell you those 10 better ways, then you'll really think I'm being challenging. But I'm not going to do that if you have a good reason. Then I can
yeah,
like settle that in my brain. So, it's a two-way street. And I think if you, especially if you go into teaching, you really have to be prepared to say, you know what, just because someone asks you a question, I can't speak for 100% of the time, but it doesn't always mean that they're challenging you or they're challenging what you have to say. Maybe they just want more information, and that's okay. That's your job. You're supposed to give that. So that took me a couple of years to kind of work through. But as I said, my father was the type of person who would be like, don't talk back, don't challenge, don't do this. I'm the man of the house. You have to do as I say. And so it was really deep ingrained within me. It's
yeah,
a lot.
yeah, yeah. And I think that when I first started teaching, I had a lot of people asking questions because I was young or I looked young. Especially if you have one of those somebody, especially in a graduate program that's older, asking questions like,
Yeah.
sometimes some people that are older feel like they can't learn from anybody younger. um, or I haven't had enough experience, and it's like, oh, so since I haven't had that experience, that means I can't teach that. Or if somebody's had a lot, that means that they know everything. I don't
Yeah.
subscribe to that, but I I had to learn. What I do now is learn is always right. I always think that if I get questions, I didn't explain it well enough, and I need to find a better way or different way to explain it, and that helps me not feel offended either way. And it just makes me say, okay, how can I improve the way I explain this? Because I've done a lot of like reading of like literally like I'll do a lot of reading of precision teaching and everything, that I always try to seek out more because it helps me understand more. And when things are phrased differently, I sometimes have better understanding.
Right.
And I think that it could be the same for other learners. So I always try to seek that opportunity for them to be able to explain it differently at any time.
Benefit of the doubt, 100%.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like, luckily I never like held it against any of my students, but in the back of my mind there would always be like, are they challenging this? Are they going to
Hmm.
be a turd? Are they going to report me for something? Like, but that paranoia, especially being an advocate in advocate spaces, which we don't talk about enough, there's always that fear that like it could be taken away or it could be
Yeah.
challenged in a way that you don't want to have to meet with your supervisor over a misunderstanding or something. So that could be a slippery slope that we dive down that I don't know that we necessarily need to.
Yeah, no. One of the things that I did want to talk about this time that I just thought of as we were talking about
Shoot.
students is maybe this should even be a segment. Student success. Like I, I, I get so much joy from seeing my students learn and be successful and
Yeah.
do the thing that they weren't able to do before or they've been working towards. That I thought that
Right.
maybe we should have a segment where we just like talk about
Mm-hmm.
our student success. Like today, I had a student who passed their applied project defense. Right, so they
Yay.
passed. Yeah, they completed the response requirements for pretty much the entire master's program. I say pretty much because I'm like, don't fall off the face of the earth. Make
Yeah.
sure we can contact you because we might need to. But they passed. And one of the things that they did is they stepped outside of their comfort zone. And I recommended using the standard acceleration chart. They used this website that I created so that it could be super easy. And then because they use the standard acceleration chart that doesn't just show sessions, it shows like actual days, they recognized, oh, this learner has missed quite a few days here and there. I didn't notice that before because it was just sessions. And now I'm able to see these very minute changes. We have weekends, so it's clearly, differences in behavior after weekends maybe. So all of these things were really beneficial to them because they were able to see a fuller picture of the data. And then they used it in their presentation, which they liked. And then they said they liked it so much that they're going to use it for another client of theirs moving forward. It's not for school. So we have generalization outside of the assignment. And that was like super big for me. Like, this is what
That's
I'm here
huge.
for. So that's a big
So
win.
nice.
What about you? Do you have any wins for students?
I do, yeah. Now, I actually this morning just had a student defend a proposal
Hmm.
successfully with very, very little editing. So that's always huge because nobody ever goes through either a proposal defense or a final defense for any research project with very little to change or very
Yeah.
few edits. So, like, the fact that it was so well prepared. It helped boost my confidence a little bit too because sometimes that imposter syndrome creeps in. It's like, I mean, what am I missing here? Because I know that there are things that I'm missing, but that's why you have a committee, and
Yeah.
so that was a little bit of a confidence boost. So I'm looking forward to more of that. I have several students coming down the pike too, getting ready to defend their proposals, and when it rains it pours, it seems they're all kind of usually at the same stage at the same time, and that's kind of
Yeah.
where I'm at. So yeah, I definitely want to celebrate that win. Yeah, and I've had a few other students who, when I challenge like reframing, so we talk about identity and person first language, especially with like autism and disability communities. I think I'm finally getting through to some students about how it's just kind of a lens or a framework that we use, not just like a formality for APA or something like that, because I see it start to generalize, kind of like what you're talking about. So getting those little glimmers here and there are what keep the change fuel makers going. And that I don't not notice them. So if you are a student and you're listening, we really appreciate those. So yeah, those are my
Yeah.
wins.
Yeah. Yeah. And the way that I support students is interesting because I didn't know, like, you would think that if you're a professor, all you do is grade and teach. But that's not true. I mean, it's a lot of it, yes, but
Yeah.
like, when I have meetings with my students, a lot of times they have really high anxiety. They're super stressed out.
Yeah.
They're overwhelmed. They're confused. They're frustrated. They're all of these big emotions. And I had a student come in and she was really upset and she was concerned she wasn't going to pass. And, we've all had that time. It's like one of those, like, I told her, there's this saying, is it really grad school if you didn't cry? And not to make it okay or whatever, but like to let her know, like, your emotions are natural when you're brushing up against such a big task
Yeah.
and an arduous situation, because so few people actually go through a graduate program, fewer pass through it. And when you like talk to people, people just kind of don't really talk about all the stress and strife that they've had to go through,
Oh,
maybe
yeah.
because a lot of it we probably forget due to it being trauma, and we just try not to ever think
Push
about it.
that out.
I mean, ask me about my IRB process, and I'll be
Oh
like, "What
God.
IRB process?"
Wait, I did that?
Um,
Weird.
exactly. But it was like I was supporting her. I was like really being like, "Hey, look, you've never done this before. I can't expect you to
Right.
do any of it perfectly. I want you to just send me what you have. We'll work on it. We'll shape it up. We'll get it to where it needs to be. You're on track. You're gonna be okay. I know things. There's things that are out of your control, and there's things that are in your control. So let's take the things that are out of your control and put them to the side for now. Let's look at what's in your control and what we can do. Let's break all these things down." I walked through some things with her, and then felt so much relief from it, and I felt like I was doing my job well. And I had to think about a lot of ways. How would my fiance handle this in this situation? How would some of my mentors think? And I'm pulling from all these different resources to be the best advisor that I could be, and mentor. And when I was doing that, I just felt like, man, this is what I'm here for. I'm happy that I was able to usher the student through and support them in their time of concern. And it's one of those things where it's like, man, I really enjoy being able to support them in this part of the journey.
Yeah, I completely agree. I love this conversation because I always talk about how, even though my PhD is in behavior analysis, it did not prepare me for all these different pieces that I have to do as a part of this job as being a professor. And so, like, first off, we're not really always taught the most effective ways to teach. We're not always taught how to conduct a college level, master's, or doctoral level course and grade and do all these things. We are not taught how to advise. We are not taught how to you know basically counsel students through some of these situations. And the only piece that I usually take as part of my own experience is that I've been there and I've been through it. And but ultimately my experience is so vastly different than every other student. I actually had
Hmm.
a pretty easy time. I don't have children. I didn't have any major life circumstances except for an unexpected breakup of a long-term relationship. But that was at the end of my process, right as I was getting ready to defend my dissertation. So arguably it could have been at a much, much worse time. So like I was okay with that because it was like I'm closing out this chapter, I'm closing out that chapter. Let's just do all these major life changes together. But I didn't have any housing instability. I didn't have any sort of income instability. None of these things came up for me. My IRB process was pretty smooth, but that doesn't take away from the empathy that I can provide to students and the courtesy of like extensions and like working with them on how to work through some of these situations. I may not always understand the circumstances, but I can assist and facilitate to an extent. I can't go in and fix all of the issues, which I, as somebody with high empathy, I want to do. And so, like,
Hmm.
having that line is really hard. But yeah, we don't talk enough about how being a professor, just because you're skilled in one particular area of your degree doesn't mean that you're actually prepared for all of the scope that you will be doing as a professor because we wear many hats.
Exactly. And did you get practice teaching? Did you get
Right.
opportunities to teach courses? Did you get feedback as you were teaching courses from people who have been doing it longer, better, stronger? And also, like, my experience, like, I did not cry for
Yeah, I
my
don't think
during
I
my time, but
I don't I think
Me,
they're
I
actually
think that, yeah, for me, like I don't, I'm not a crier. Like as a male, I haven't been, yeah,
weird.
exactly. I haven't been socialized to emote that way. So how did I emote? I dissociated. I, you know what I mean?
Yep.
It's it's hard to cry if you don't think about it, if you don't think these things through,
Right?
and maybe the problem will go away. It won't go away. It'll be right there tomorrow where you left it. I
It's fine.
promise you.
They'll just become
But
tumors later in life. It's fine.
exactly,
Hey,
exactly.
Twitch.
So like maybe crying would have been a more healthy way to emote through that process. Now that I think about that, hindsight is 2020. But I think that it's like you said, everybody's experience is different, and navigating that experience is especially difficult because you often don't have a lot of people to support you who have
Yeah.
been through it. You know what I mean? Especially when you're at the doctoral level, and when you're at the master's level, you have different people who have such vast different experiences, and it's never the same. And having a supportive advisor is apparently rare because you'll talk to a lot of people
Really?
throughout masters and dissertation programs, and they'll tell you some horror stories. And I've just been fortunate to just have like, oh yeah, really really high grades, dang near tens all the way through for me.
Mm.
But when I hear other people talk about it, I'm just like, man, like I could not. I don't know if I would have passed if that's what I had.
I mean, I guess I shouldn't be shocked. Like, I literally have these conversations with students on site. You know, arguably, especially in a master's program. In doctoral programs, I feel that we get more direct interaction with students, and they're at that level where they're seeking out our support a lot
Mm-hmm.
more. With masters, it's like they're putting out the fires, and so it's like we're an afterthought in some cases. But it's very rare that I have a student in a master's level ABA program who sees me as a resource without me having to go out of my way to say, hey, remember I'm here. You can reach out to
Mm-hmm.
me. I can
Mm-hmm.
provide, support or guidance. Once again, I may not understand, but I can try to help and facilitate. If nothing else, just listen. Sometimes students just want to vent at me for like 30 minutes for our meetings every week, and that's okay. You may need to get it out because nobody else in your space wants to hear it. And so, like, I can be that soundboard for you. But, yeah, in a master's level, they're working on site with their supervisors primarily. They're the ones that they are listening to. And the
Mm-hmm.
types of things that they see on site are sometimes really scary and concerning to me because they'll write them
Yeah.
up in their papers. And I'm like, I don't know where you think it's okay to use food to tell someone that they've done a good job at something, but that leads to disordered eating. So why are we still doing this? And like we have to have those conversations. And then I'm seen as like the weirdo because, well,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not on site working with them the most. So it's such a challenge at those different levels. But yeah, I guess I shouldn't really be surprised at the bad supervisor piece of things. I wish it wasn't that way, though. I really, maybe I
Yeah.
just choose not to think about it. Maybe that's another trauma thing that I just push down.
Yeah. And I think that not, I don't think that people set out to be bad supervisors. I mean,
No,
I think that it happens over
I hope
time.
not.
Yeah, I hope not too. Either happens over time or it shapes, or like look at all the conditions that they're going through that got them to that position, because when you talk to people about why they got into the field, for the most part, they have really, I've heard really endearing and kind ways of why they got into the field. And a lot of people, interestingly enough, it's because they have a brother, sister, family member, friend who has autism. That's overwhelmingly, or like even a child. That's overwhelmingly what I hear. So I think
Right.
it's so interesting when you hear people talk about it online, and it's like I don't think that. I think that we need to have a conversation where everybody sits down and communicates, and then we like map this out, because there's a lot of people that make decisions like at the top, BACB, ABAI, that make decisions. It's like y'all need to talk to other people too. You can't just be
Mm-hmm.
the only ones, the arbiters of truth and the way that things go. But then there's also people on the sides that need to be talked to, people that are actually the family members, the actual people that are receiving the services who need to be in the rooms having the conversation like, hey, you may have found that that was super effective, but it's also super harmful. So let's work again to try to figure out how we can design these procedures that meet somewhere where it's not harmful and it's helpful.
On that same token, we shouldn't put all of our stock into like one person for one area of our field. I tend to not to just completely throw this person under the bus, but we talk about John Bailey and ethics a lot. And
Oof.
it's like, who named him the official god of ethics of ABA? Because literally, if you send in a message to the BACB and you say, hey, I'm struggling with this ethical issue, he personally will respond back to you. And it's like, okay, sure, I get you have the book and you've done presentations and blah blah blah. But like when we put all of our stock into one particular person for any area, that's kind of dangerous because we're not checking each other.
Yeah.
So I would actually assert that like this is a really good time to discuss that piece and throw that in there and say that hey, if you're only relying on one person for all of your information about like functional behavior assessments or ethics or whatever, you really need to rethink your system. And so that's why I think the network and webbing of the practitioner piece is so important and vital. But it's really challenging when you have those differences in values. So just
Yeah.
to bring that conversation back full circle.
No, no, no. You're. I think it's 100% correct, and I've learned that more. Like, I wanted to do research on my own, but the more that I include other people, the better it gets. The
Yeah,
more diversity of thought, the more I learn. The more I'm like, man, I never
right.
even imagined that. I'm so glad that you said that because that's literally driving the direction that we're taking now. Like, and so to have that one person to be the end all be all, I'm just like, y'all, that's incredibly scary. And I'm gonna
Cultish.
say it. I'm gonna say it, cultist. I'm gonna say this. I've heard some stories about some things that John Bailey has said, believed, or did, and as a black person in America, they are very concerning. So, I mean,
I'm here for
you
this
know,
tea. I'm here for it.
I need to have clear understanding of what it was to share it. But when I get the lowdown, I'll bring up a
And
this is
receipts.
what was said. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And receipts. Because but I mean, I'm just, a little birdie told me X, Y, and Z, who's, and it's like, somebody in that position says something like that. I'm really not surprised. The only people that are surprised are, in the mirror.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the thing. Like we talk about this occasionally on our recordings and outside of recordings as peers and friends. But I I wish I was more surprised now when I hear those things about people in the field. But it's so desensitized to me now that it's kind of disturbing. Our field is very particularly enabling about problematic behavior. We tend to really look the other way when other fields have more strict means of identifying harm, mitigating harm, and then actually like following through what they say they're going to follow through with. I don't know. I think of some of the things that we've posted with like Nuraba in particular, and we don't post anything without receipts unless it's
Hmm.
anonymous testimony, in which case
Hmm.
we do not particularly name the person who made the report. We might just be a secondhand whistleblower for things, but otherwise we don't post without receipts. And some of the things that we have posted about, people would have their certification revoked or removed or license taken away or whatever, and these people are still allowed to practice. They're still running clinics. They're still exploiting learners. And so we really need to think about what accountability looks like and what actually reparative actions look like in our field in particular, because I'm not seeing it. And that is really disheartening, and it's hard for me to stay in the field and fight. Just saying.
No, I agree. And I'm going to add to that that I worry, and this is even more scary, is what
Oh
if
gosh.
what if we're not that different from what's happening in other fields? I
Hmm.
mean, look at who is our current president right now.
Right. Oh
I
God,
mean,
yes.
you can you can do a lot of harm and still reach the highest office in the land. So I worry that our field isn't as much of an aberration as we think it is. We just know more because we're in the field. And then when you get to another field, it's like, what am I going to act like there's no harm in education or special education
Right.
or health services or the hospitals or whatever? Like, I everywhere you go, not to excuse ABA, but to
No,
situate it
but you're
appropriately
right.
in the environment that we exist. There's a societal ill within the fabric of our communities that permeates everything.
Maybe we should break that down on a future talk. And, I wonder to what extent I feel that particular personality traits and behaviors tend to elevate and find their way up at the top. The more toxic the behavior, the more likely you are to go to the top. Let's be real. And
Hmm.
so it kind of makes me wonder about the behavior of everybody else. So are the rest of us just so traumatized and suppressed that we can't speak out, that we can't do things? Do we really not have full power? What is the issue here? So I don't know. It would be so interesting to kind of digest the powers that be and like what behavioral traits are reinforced, maintained, punished, etc., versus the enabler responses. I don't know. That would just be really. That would be a huge dive, but like it would be
Yeah,
interesting.
I agree. I think we should do it. I also think that the fewer intersections of disenfranchisement and oppression that you have, the less the easier it is to have less empathy.
Yeah,
So I think that that
I agree.
directly goes to your upward mobility in the workplace and all that stuff. So
What are you saying here? That's so weird. I
yeah,
I don't know what you mean.
yeah, big words hopefully will cover what I meant by that. Um, but this is the podcast. Always, no, the
The
learner is always
podcast.
right.
I mean, we are the
Um,
podcast,
we are the only podcast that
the
exists
only
ever.
one.
Yes, the
I'll
first
take
and
the
only
only one.
one. Yeah. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Comment, comment on a comment, make an enemy, and share
You
and
took my
ask
line.
us. Sorry,
Make
I
a.
love it so
Well, I'll say
much.
make a friend.
There you go. There you
Make a
go.
friend
A friend of me.
if you must.
There we go.